Sometimes when you're going along at a good pace and you're everything seems to be going really well, you have to stop and make sure everyone that's going with you is actually going in the same direction. We're here in Nehemiah chapter 5, and we're going to continue looking at the challenges Nehemiah faces in the book of Nehemiah and how he overcomes them through prayer and perseverance and trusting in God and just using all the discernment that's available to him about what God wills and what God has done and so on and so forth. And we've been going along at a fair pace. And last week we looked at how forces on the outside, the foreign nations and leaders around them were ridiculing and attempting to disrupt and even destroy the work of Nehemiah and the builders. They do not wish Jerusalem to be rebuilt and to be a strong, fortified city once again. But here in Nehemiah chapter 5, after all the unity and the cohesion we saw in chapters 2 and 3 especially, and even in chapter 4 about how the people unite to take on this task, we see something come up in chapter 5, is that the people may not be as united as they seemed, that there's some issues going on. This is going to be the first of several. But we encounter that there's great division, it would seem, among the people. And this division is for a very just reason. There's some not good things going on. So let's read Nehemiah chapter 5 and begin one together and see how Nehemiah approaches this problem that is presented among his own people. It says, "Now there was a great outcry of the people and of their wives against their Jewish brothers. For there were those who said, 'We, our sons and our daughters, are many. Therefore let us get grain that we may eat and live.' There were others who said, 'We are mortgaging our fields, our vineyards, and our houses, that we might get grain because of the famine.' Also, there were those who said, 'We have borrowed money for the king's tax on our fields and our vineyards. Now our flesh is like the flesh of our brothers, our children like their children. Yet behold, we are forcing our sons and our daughters to be slaves. And some of our daughters are forced into bondage already. And we are helpless because our fields and vineyards belong to others.' Then I was very angry when I had heard their outcry and these words, and I consulted with myself and contended with the nobles and the rulers and said to them, 'You are exacting usury, each from his brother.' Therefore I held a great assembly against them, and I said to them, 'We, according to our ability, have redeemed our Jewish brothers who were sold to the nations. Now would you even sell your brothers that they may be sold to us?'" We have a difficult and complicated situation among the people of Israel and the remnant, it would seem. You see, the Jews, after they were defeated by Nebuchadnezzar and such, were carried off into captivity in Babylon and various other places. And the Assyrians 100 years before had done the same to the 10 northern tribes in Israel. And then the remnant had returned, a remnant of the remnant, actually, because Nehemiah did not return and many others. Now, a ton of these captives carried off are in slavery and in bondage in various places all over the world. And they've been trying, it appears, to buy back and locate and try and bring back as many as possible to the land that wish to come or can come. But as we've talked about before, things aren't all rainbows and sunshine in the promised land for the remnant, it would appear. There's famine, there's enemies, there's difficulties. It's a barren land without a lot of infrastructure, it would seem. And so we have different groups of people. Some are saying we need to go out and work and get food for our families. We're here working on this wall and stuff, and we need to go work and get food for our families. That's going to be really important right now. Others say, we're mortgaging our properties, our fields, our houses, our land, just to get food for our families. So they have it worse off than the formers who just need to go take care of some business. They're saying we are accumulating debt. We're trying to just feed ourselves, and we're having to mortgage all of our properties. And there's others who are even worse, and they say we're borrowing money just to pay the taxes of the king on our land, and we're having to sell even our children into bondage to pay the taxes, because you can't not pay taxes that day or this. You got to pay them taxes. He says, yet our children are like everyone else's children here in the people of Israel, but we're being forced to do this because our fields and our vineyards belong to others. We no longer have possession and ownership of them. You see, the better off of the people of Israel, the Jews here, the nobles, the leaders and such, those who aren't as afflicted by the hardship, the famines, the taxes and such, they're lending money to their brothers. You think, oh, that's kind of them. Well, sort of. They're also demanding a large amount of usury or interest, and they can't pay it. And so they take from their brothers and sisters, and they take the ability of their brothers and sisters to even get food, and they're having to borrow money and to pay taxes and sell off their very children into slavery. This is not a situation that I think God would approve of, and it's definitely not one that Nehemiah approves of either. Because they're not supposed to charge their brothers and sisters usury by the very law itself. They're not even supposed to engage in that. They're supposed to take care of the poor amongst them. They're supposed to take care of their brothers and sisters in need, just as we are. And so he's very angry, and he consults with the nobles, and he says, we're trying to buy back and redeem our brothers that have been sold into slavery. And you're over here making a profit and essentially selling and forcing them to be sold into slavery because you're putting money in your pocket. That's not right. We're here trying to do things right the way God would have us do, to rebuild this nation, to rebuild this city. And you're over here destroying the lives of your brothers and sisters so you can put money in your back pocket. This is causing a lot of tension, you might say. So let's keep reading. Then they were silent and could not find a word to say. Again I said, the thing which you are doing is not good. Should you not walk in the fear of our God because of the reproach of the nations, our enemies? And likewise I, my brothers and my servants, are lending them money and grain. Please, let us leave off this usury. Please give back to them this very day their fields, their vineyards, their olive groves, and their houses. Also the 100th part of the money and of the grain, the new wine, the oil which you're exacting from them. Then they said, we will give it back and require nothing from them. We will do exactly as you say. So I called the priests and took an oath from them that they would do according to this promise. I also shook out the front of my garment and said, thus may God shake out every man from his house and from his possessions who does not fulfill this promise. Even thus may he be shaken out and emptied. And all the assembly said, Amen. And they praised the Lord. Then the people did according to this promise. So we seem to have passed over this hurdle. The nobles, the officials, those who were better off and in leadership and monetary positions are shamed by Nehemiah, as well they should be, because they're taking advantage of people that are really down, that have had a long string of hard times, that are currently in the midst of hard times. And they're more concerned about filling their pockets than their brothers and sisters' welfare. And so they're shamed. And they promise to give the things back that they took, to not require more, to basically assume some monetary loss for all the stuff that they've gotten over the years, it would seem. And he brings the priests into there, the religious leaders, to make sure this happens. Because Nehemiah's not going to stay here forever. He's not going to be around forever. He wants them to make sure this continues to not happen and that they continue to fulfill their promises. And so everyone seems to be able to move on from this and get back to the work that's going on. And to keep pressing ahead with the other problems that are facing them. As we get into the last part of this chapter, Nehemiah sets an example for others to follow, for those in leadership positions, for those who are overseeing and such like that. He goes kind of into the first person way he talks about it, more of a journal almost, and he says, moreover, from the day I was appointed to be their governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year to the 32nd year of King Artaxerxes, for 12 years, neither I nor my kinsmen have eaten the governor's food allowance. But the former governors who were before me laid burdens on the people and took from them bread and wine, besides 40 shekels of silver. Even their servants domineered the people. But I did not do so, because of the fear of God. I also applied myself to the work on this wall. We did not buy any land, and all my servants were gathered there for the work. Moreover, there were at my table 150 Jews and officials, besides those who came to us from the nations that were around us. Now that which was prepared for us each day was 1 ox and 6 choice sheep. Also birds were prepared for me, and once in 10 days all sorts of wine were furnished in abundance. Yet for all this I did not demand the governor's food allowance, because the servitude was heavy on this people. Remember me, O my God, for good, according to all that I have done for this people. See, Nehemiah writes in his record here, he wants to make sure people know that he's not pointing fingers at the nobles and officials and those who have means who are putting heavy burdens on this people. He wants to make sure that people know that he's not just pointing fingers, he's setting an example, because he's not a hypocrite here. He says, for 12 years as I served, and now this is kind of a summary of his whole time in Israel. We haven't got through the whole 12 years yet, as you'll see. But he says, for the whole 12 years I was here, working as the governor, I didn't take a single penny for my work. I did it because I wanted to serve my people and to serve my God first and foremost. I didn't take the food allowance, even though you can see it was quite a burden. A whole oxen and 6 sheep and tons of birds and stuff, and then the wine every 10 days or so. That's not cheap. 100 feeding. You think you got mouths to feed in your family? Try feeding 150 plus every meal, 3 squares a day. That's going to add up fast, and as I'm sure it did. And his own servants, he didn't allow them to be in commanding positions over the people. He made sure they were out working on that wall, just like the rest of the people. So Nehemiah set a powerful example that you lead by being in the front. You lead by example. You lead by sharing the burden that's on the shoulders of the others, instead of just directing the burdens to be shared. And so he gets out there among the people. He gets out there and suffers with them and shares the burdens and the hardship, because he wants their welfare above all else. And he's doing it for God's glory, not his own. And I find it interesting that he doesn't appeal to people to remember him. He doesn't say, now follow my example and look to how the way I did things as in future times and stuff. He doesn't really say that. He calls on God. He says, God, remember what I did for this people. Remember me for good. Oh my God, because that's who he's working for. And I love Nehemiah's emphasis and his heart. He's always doing it for God's glory, not his own. And he's not even always doing it primarily for his people. He's doing it for his God, because that's of foremost importance to him, as it should be to us. So as we finish out chapter 5, we've seen a potentially disastrous issue resolved, truthfully, with a minimal of effort, it would seem. Nehemiah shames them, and then he makes them promise to change and so forth. It just shows the power and influence this man has through the grace of God and through following and in prayer and constant communication. I think it's a powerful example for anyone that may be in a leadership situation of any kind, to make sure you're bearing the burdens the same as the people you put them on. Because if you're just reaping the benefits of your leadership position and your brothers and sisters, those who are following you, are suffering, how does that honor God? That would be Nehemiah's question. How is this honoring God? Aren't you supposed to honor God as well and fear him and observe his commandments? God's commands apply to all people of all stations and all responsibilities. And so if you've been given much, maybe you have the greater responsibility now. Great position and wealth and such are not evil things. I don't believe that for a moment, but they do bring additional responsibilities, because you have the many talents, as it were. You're the one with the 10 talents. You need to make sure you're honoring God with all of them, not just some. So I would encourage you to think about, if you're into meditation and thinking on the Word of God, to read this again and think about, how am I being an example to those who are around me, to those I may have some influence upon? In what way am I honoring God in their eyes? Now, everything we do can't please everybody, and I'm not saying that. But everything we do should honor God, and people should be able to see it to some extent. Anyhow, just something to think on. Well, thank you for joining us this week. It's been interesting to go through this book together. We got some ways to go yet, so I encourage you to join us as we tune in next time for Chapter 6. Till then, this has been Biblical Musings, and thank you for joining us.